Well, good morning. One of the side of the Christian faith that we see Easter, and one is Christmas. And of course, Easter couldn't happen without Christmas, right? I mean, Christ had to be born into the world, and it brings up all kinds of stories. There's stories in the Bible. There's stories that have been written along that whole line. There's hymns and songs that have been written, and all kinds of things around this idea of Christmas and what it means to people. Many of those things are stories, sometimes, put to music, sometimes put to narrative, sometimes put in a book, sometimes just told audibly, to people and passed on from generation to generation. You may have some of those stories in your family line where that's passed on from generation to generation about Christmas, because there's things that people do at Christmas, and it's because we look at this time of the year, at least in North America, in a particular way. There's some people that get all excited about the snow, and there's some people that hate the snow. There's some people that want to come south when it's cold and enjoy Christmas in a warm atmosphere. And there's people who want to live in the south, want to go north and enjoy the cold of Christmas. And we have all kinds of ways we celebrate Christmas, because it's one of those things that we love, that we love what happens at that. And that the reason that I think that is true is because we find that there is this big story connected to it. Matter of fact, you probably have your stories connected to Christmas. Maybe it's about the family getting together. Maybe it's about decorating the tree, the meal. Maybe it's about some event that happened in and around Christmas. It's one of those things that brings us together in thought and mind about this time of the year. Well, it's no different in the Bible when we talk about the process of enjoying things in our world. It is very true for us as we look into what the Bible has to say, because people in the Bible did the exact same thing. There were things that they enjoyed. Matter of fact, Jesus would tell us that our relationship with God should be such an enjoyment in our life that it would be the best thing in the world that we could do, the most important thing that we could do, the crown of our creation was to love God with all of our heart and with all of our soul and with all of our mind, and find a way to do that. Find a way to do that. And Jesus said the second thing to that is love your neighbor as yourself. That's an expression of those exact three things. And so we've been talking about heart and smarts. How do we love God with our heart? How do we love God with our smarts? And we've looked at people in the Bible that the Bible has basically laid out and said, man is a man after God's own heart. And that gives us a framework for that man's life. And then the other man that God designated said, this is the wisest man in the world. In other words, the man with the smarts. And so we've been looking at what they wrote to help us understand, how do we love God with our heart, with our smart. Well, today we're in the book of Psalm. It is a book for people in that day that worshiped and used this as their song book in church, and oftentimes have call a hymn book, and it's songs that people have written. There's not too many of them, of those songs, that are actually the book of Psalms, because of just the way they're written, and it's very difficult to put to words. And those days that and for music of their day, and we find one, I think, that is particularly important to us when we talk about our heart and how God, and that's Psalm 66. David is the author of this psalm, and he is going to tell us, here's some things that can help you love God with all of your heart, because it centers around some things that happen because God injects some things into our life. He said, these things can help you love God with all of your heart. With all of your heart. And so we're going to look at that. I'm going to read through Psalm 66 first. It's not real long, but I'm going to read through it first, and then we'll come back and talk about these five things. These five things. So in Psalm 66, David says this is a song. This is a song to be put to music. He says, shout with joy to the God of all the earth. Sing to the glory of his name and make his praise glorious. Say to God, how awesome are your ways. So great is your power that your enemies cringe before you. All of the earth bows down to you, and they sing praises to you. They sing praises to your name. Come and see what God has done. How awesome his works in man's behalf. He's turned the sea into dry land. They pass through the waters on foot. Come, let us rejoice in him. He rules forever by his power. His eyes watch the nations. Let not the rebellious rise up against him. Praise our God, O peoples. Let the sound of his praise be heard. He has preserved our lives and kept our feet from slipping. For you, O God, have tested us, refined us like silver. You have brought us back from prison and brought us into prison and laid our burdens upon our backs. You let men ride over our heads, and we went through the fire and through the water. But you have brought us to a place of abundance. I will come to your temple and with burnt offerings and fulfill my vows to you, vows of my lips that I have promised with my mouth I have spoke when I was in trouble. I will sacrifice the fat of animals to you and the offering of bull rams. I will offer bulls and goats. Come and listen, all you who fear God. Let me tell you of what he has done for me. I have cried out to him with my troubles. His praise was on my tongue. If I had cherished sin in my heart, the Lord would not have heard. But he has surely listened to me and heard the voice in my prayers. Praise be to God, who has not rejected my prayer, nor withheld his love from me. And of course, we have in our process of language, we have several people in the psalm, and you might recognize just a piece of verses. The reality is that when we go through an experience in life, there are stories that come out of that. And David simply points out, God, there's some things that we have to learn how to love God through. And the first one we find in this passage is next 10 or 15 minutes talking about these. He said, who and what we love, we talk about. David immediately starts off the psalm with the concept and idea. Who and what we love, we talk about. You know, and that is so true in our life, in the world in which we live. There are things that we talk about on a regular basis. There are people that we talk about on a regular basis. And if we're not careful, one of the ourselves, right? And here David points out, when you love God with your heart, when you love God with he will be one of those people that you talk about on a regular basis. Notice how he crafts this in this idea. He points out, he said, we will shout it out. We will shout it out to him. And that becomes a key conversation that we have. You know, now, I don't know about, there are people in this world who talk soft. You have to strain to hear them. There's people loud just every time they talk. They can't help themselves. They're just loud, right? And we get excited. I mean, the more excited we get, the louder we tend to get. So when emotion gets involved, our Here David said, think about it. Think about the God of heaven. Why would you not shout to the heavens for all the things that God has done for you, for this relationship that you have with God? Now, I know I don't shout very much because there's some taboo connected to it. But here, shout. Matter of fact, one of the most famous songs that was written in the last 30 years was Shout to the Lord. And it was a song that invoked the fact that we should be lifting up the name of God. And why not? Because of the relationship that we have with Him. The relationship that we have. He said, sing with glory to His name. Sing with glory to His name. Now we know the Christmas story, but one of the big parts of the Christmas story that often just kind of gets run over in the hurry to get to the manger is what happened in the heavens. What happened in the heavens when Jesus was born? The angels, the Bible tells us, the angels burst out. And what were they saying? Glory to God in the highest. Peace on earth, goodwill to men. So their song was this very idea that David the psalmist wrote hundreds and hundreds of years before when he said, when we sing glory to His name. Matter of fact, we have a hymn, glory to His name. Because we realize as Christ followers that having a conversation with and about God is important. I just pray that oftentimes we don't express it enough in how we talk with God. So David says, look, when who you have a relationship with and what you love, you talk about. What you talk about. Because it's at the very center of our lives. You see, the things that don't matter too much to us, we don't talk about very much. Have you noticed that? Matter of fact, oftentimes we just avoid the conversation altogether. When it's not at the center of our being, of our person, if we don't really care too much about it, we don't like to talk about it. Right? Have you ever noticed that when somebody asks you a question, too much about that? Or you kind of maybe think you're supposed to know because they think you're supposed to know. You don't know anything about it, you don't say anything. Right? But the things that you know about, you know, we're all pretty opinionated people, in at least in the United States. If somebody asks us our opinion about something we know something about, we're glad to give it because it's kind of at the center. Here David says, look, if you want to have a relationship with God and show that God you love Him and show other people that you have a conversation because it's at the center of your life. And it can even get a little loud. It can even get a little loud. It amazes me that we have no problem getting loud at a football game or a basketball game or a hockey game or at a soccer game or at some big event. We don't have any problem getting loud and protesting against something we don't agree with or celebrating with something we do agree with, but we have trouble, it seems, to have this moment of praise to God and shout out to God. David says that's what we should be doing because He's at the center of our being, the center of our life. The second thing we notice in this passage that can help us demonstrate our love toward God is not only the fact that what we love and who we love is God is at the center of our life, so we talk about it, but notice this, the other thing he says is who and what we love, we are able to give honor with special moments. Notice he says, so to God, talk about how awesome He is with His deed, and as one version, and give honor to His name. Give honor to Him. It's amazing that when we go into a courtroom, we really understand the rules of the court, right? How do you address the judge? Your Honor. You know, you can get in trouble in court for not saying that. But here, we sometimes forget that God's name and who God is so important. We should give honor to who He is because of all He has done. David describes it this way. He says, all the earth bows down. That's how much honor the world gives God. I think one of the moments that probably we often miss in life and things that get by us is that we don't slow down long enough to see all the things that God has done. You know, Solomon was pretty smart about that thing. He said, you have trouble working, go lay down in the grass and watch the ants, because you will learn a lot from them. Now, you can't do that too much this time of the year if you live in the South. If you go up north, the ants have already done what they knew they were supposed to do. They worked all summer, put all their food stuff in the ground so that when the ground froze, they could stay warm and have food to eat. Solomon said, go do that. Because there's this concept in nature that all of nature understands the awesomeness of God. The awesomeness of God. Lavon and I have a good friend, partner, and she's a real good photographer. She's always catching these moments in God's creation. A sunrise, a cloud, an animal, a flower, a plant, a setting. Things that we go by so quickly, her eye is trained to see that, and she snaps really great pictures about that. And I'm always amazed by some of the things that she's able to catch because she's looking for them. See, oftentimes in life, because we get run over by life and the things of life, we forget that the honor that is due God for everything that's around us, we don't see it. We miss it because it's not in the forefront of our mind. So here David says, remember, he even says, come see all that God has done, all awesome works on man's behalf. And so he goes to a story. He goes to a story that all these people know that were Israelites. He said, remember when we came up, the enemy was behind us, and we came up to this place that we over this informable place that we were trapped. We're hopeless. Matter of fact, immediately we began to talk about, just go back, let's go back. And suddenly the God of heaven opened up the sea, and we walked across dry ground. And the enemy still pursued us. And then God just closed the sea. He said, you remember that story? Remember that story that was told often? It's all about that God delivered us. And no wonder he said to us, come and see all that God has done, how awesome his work is. So one of the most important things that we can do as Christ followers is talk about the awesomeness of God and how he has delivered us. He has delivered. Why? Because who and what we love, it's easy to talk about. It's easy to talk about. Today is our youngest son's birthday. He's 30 years old today. Right 30 years ago, things were pretty bad. He had discovered, been delivered, had a hole in his lung. Well, actually, it was in the hole in between his lung and the they call it a sac that protects it. And so every breath was basically collapsing his lung, because instead of the air coming back out, it was going into this pocket, and it was making his lungs smaller and smaller and smaller. Of course, you know, when you're a little baby, your lungs don't have a whole lot of lung, right? And so he would suffocate himself to death. We lived in this little town with a small hospital, and not only that, in the meantime, there was one of the biggest ice storms we'd ever had in North Texas. It was bad, and so the hospital was trying to figure out, how do we get him to Dallas, Texas, to Taylor Hospital, because that was the only place that had this special piece of medical equipment that could fix surgery, and they didn't want to do surgery if they could help. And so this day to us is one of those days that we're reminded of that, because we have to see the awesome of God. It was really scary, you know, and it was scary getting there. You know, fortunately nobody rode with me, because they would have probably probably had to drop them off at a hospital somewhere back in Dallas. Every was ice over. I was fortunate to get through, and I slipped and slip slide my way all the way to Dallas to be there when they got Caleb to the hospital in Taylor. And it's easy for me to talk about this, even though it was scary, even though it seemed to be like things are really. We got through that, and we talk about it. And we talk about it. It reminds us of those things. You probably have those like that in your life too. Maybe it wasn't that. Maybe it was something else. But you're reminded of the awesomeness of God. And you're willing to talk about it. Well, the same is true for us, to talk about all the great things that God has done for us. David said, talk about it. Sing about it. Declare it. God is worth it. Because it demonstrates to the world God is and talks and struggle with followers, because people tend to make the rosy life that everything's going to be perfect, you're never going to have any trouble, and you're never going to have any struggle, because God's on your side. God is on our side. As we see in the message that we realize that no matter what happens in life, God is there for us. So he describes it this way. He says, pray, O people. He has preserved our life. Somehow or another, we forget that God doesn't owe us. God doesn't owe us. God doesn't owe us the next breath, the next heartbeat. God doesn't owe us. God chooses to bless us. When we go through different, as David pointed out, he said, we found ourselves in terrible situations. He said, we found ourselves in captivity. We found ourselves put in horrible conditions. That God was there for us. We found ourselves. You brought us out. You were there with us. So he said, oh, his praise served our lives and kept being falling down, staying down. The idea when you and I realize that who we love and what we love about God, things God, it impacts us in such a way because it has a way of making us a better person. It's easy to talk about things that go right. It's easy to tell the story. Oh, this has gone right, and this has gone right, and this has gone right. And everybody, well, that's easy. That's easy for people who we say, oh, with a silver spoon in their mouth, meaning that, oh, they haven't had difficulties in life. But we find out what life is made of, and our relationships are made of, and our love is made of when what? When things don't go so well, when things are hard, when things are difficult. And Christmas is to bring that to light to people. One of the things talked about the Christmas story, but it's also people being depressed. For some people, this will be the first year to be alone at Christmas. For some people, this will be the first year to be without some significant person in their life. Maybe they lost their job. They don't have a job. So it'll be a significant thing where they don't have any income. Or it may be a Christmas that you go into without a home to live in, or a car to drive, or your health. And you're reminded of that. And you go, well, I have two choices. I can praise the God of heaven, or I can wallow in my struggles. And oftentimes we realize that because we have Christ, we have hope. And because we have hope, we can push beyond the struggle. Because it is the end. It may be sad, it may be disappointing, it may be hard, it may be all those things, but Christ in us, the hope of glory, lives there to get us through that. To get us through that. And so David the psalmist says to us, He will deliver us and bring us to a place of abundance. Bring us to a place of abundance. Then he tells us the fourth thing about loving God and why we love Him and what happens in our life. And because it invokes us to take action in our life. It invokes us to take action. He says, I will come to your temple with burnt offerings and fulfill my vows to you. Vows my lips promised and my mouth spoke. I was in. How many times we heard and maybe even said ourselves, oh God, if you will just get me out of this, I will. And that part that you say is the part that changes. I will do this. I will do that. I will give this. I will give that. Whatever it is, it winds up bringing us into a better place. Because who and what we love, when it causes us to take action and to give up or to give back what we have, what we have held to, what we won't let go of. And here David points that out. He said, I will fulfill that which I spoke in my days of trouble. I will, notice what he says, sacrifice. I'll give up some stuff. See, because a lot of the things in life that give us problems are things we just need to give up. It's not that they're bad or immoral or wrong. It's things we just need to let go of because of the relationship that we need to have with God. We need to have God. And so he says, I will give it up. I will sacrifice you. And then he tells us, what love will compel us to share the story. Come, all you who fear God. Listen to the story. Listen to the story. Let me tell you what He has done for me. See, the power of the story of God is just as powerful as the story of the Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of Luke. That the season, the time, at the appointed time, Christ was born. That was an amazing story to be told. More of us, after the fact, some 2,000 years later, know the story better than the people who lived there that day. You see, there were many people who believed the story was going to happen. There were many people who even were in different parts of the world were scurrying over the writings to see, well, when could an event like this occur? We've seen this star in the east, and let's go find out about this story. Why didn't everybody else see that? Looking for it. They weren't willing to participate in it. And there were those shepherds out in the fields watching their flock by night, and the angels burst them. They said, let's go see this child who has been born. There's a story birth in our life when we really things move us to tell this story. David says, he gives us his story. He said, I have cried out to Him with my mouth, and His praises was on my tongue. And he said, and here's what I realized, that if I have cherished sin, if I have loved sin, if I have held sin in my life, in my heart, in my inmost being, he said, I have learned that God would not listen to me. But God has listened. Has a voice. And He says, praise be to God, who has not rejected my prayer, nor withheld His love from me. You see, we all have that story. Fashion. We may not be shepherds that becoming King of Israel. I don't have any of those particular in our story, but we have that story where we have cried out to God and God has heard us and responded to us. It's a story worth telling. So as we come into Christmas, be reminded that yes, there's this great Christmas story about Christ coming into the world, and we should tell that story over and over. There's also your story made possible. Holiday season, be reminded that the Christmas story is real about loving God with all of our heart. How can we do that? We can do that when we give glory to Him, when we honor Him for who He is. We realize that yes, we will go through difficult days, but He will bring. When we realize that we have a story to tell that others need to hear. So as you and I go into this holiday season, around our family and our friends and even strangers, be reminded that the story He wants you to tell, and share the story, because people need to hear it. Let's talk to Him about that this morning. God, this morning we thank You and we praise You that You gave us your story. You didn't leave us in the dark. You proclaimed it to all of the world. You even sent Your angels to tell us about the story, the greatest story ever told. But we're reminding God as that story is a part of our life and a part of who we are, it gives us the opportunity to tell the story. With people, tell my story about how your story changed my life. God, to give praise to Your name, to shout out to You all the great things that You have done for me, for all the blessings that have come, those that I don't deserve and sometimes don't care for. That God, Your name should be praised. God, help me to do that. God, help me to honor Your name above everything. God, forgive me in the times when I don't. Forgive me the times when I don't. Thank You, God, that You love us. We pray this in the strong and mighty name of Jesus, our Savior. Amen and amen.